been playing Pokemon Go since day one, which is July 6th of 2016, and every single day since I have played Pokemon Go up to this current date, and over all that time, I've got a lot of rare Pokemon. And I thought it would be fun to show you my top 20 rarest Pokemon that I currently have in my collection. And yes, I am stealing this idea from Brandon Ton, but he's a really good buddy of mine, so hopefully he won't care. Love you, Brandon. Number 20 on the list is my Shiny Unknown F. The reason why this is on the list is because this took me over 300 raids to get. We thought that during the Ultra Unlock that Shiny Unknown raids would be boosted, but they weren't. They were full odds, and it took me a long time to get this one. And since then, I've sworn that I will never do another Unknown raid unless they're proven to be boosted, but yeah, this is a really rare Unknown, all things considered. Unknown F has never been boosted before in any live event or anything like that, so that's why I consider this to be near the bottom of my rarest Pokemon. Number 19 on this list is this Shiny Tauros right here, and you might be a little curious why I have a Shiny Tauros. It's not a Shundo or anything like that. This is the IVs, but if you look at where it's from, that's why I consider this to be one of the rarest ones. It's from Sydney, New South Wales, Australia, but not only is it from there, but technically we hatched it. And we have only been able to do this once during an Ultra Unlock a very long time ago. And I got very fortunate and was able to hatch this, and this might be one of the few, if possibly the only Shiny Tauros from Australia, though there are millions of players, so I can't really claim that. But that's why I consider it to be one of my top rarest Pokemon, because it's from a very rare location and the way we got it. Not to mention that this Pokemon is a North American regional, which means you can only normally get it in the United States, and there was a Safari Zone in Sevilla where you could have gotten it as well, but it's never been available in Australia normally. Number 18 on the list is this Shiny Kangaskhan, and it's on the list for a very similar reason as the Tauros. We hatched this thing during the Ultra Unlock, but the reason why this one is above the Tauros is because I hatched this within the first 30 to 45 minutes of the event going live, and back then it used to go live for everybody at the same time. And I believe this might be the first ever Shiny Kangaskhan to be hatched in the world, because again, in the first 30 to 45 minutes, and it was from my second 7-kilometer egg of the event. Obviously, there's no way to tell if this is the first one ever, but I'm just gonna go by that because I couldn't find anybody saying anything earlier than me. But I could possibly be wrong. But another reason why it's on this list is it's also a Goku bad. Literally, my first Shiny Regional of the Kanto region was a Shiny 98%. That's pretty darn good. And another thing about this Kangaskhan is that it is an Australian regional from Orlando, Florida. And again, hatched, which is pretty cool. Even though we did have a Kangaskhan raid day, so technically Orlando Kangaskhan's aren't super rare anymore, but back then it was huge. Number 17 on this list is this Shiny Mrs. Lime that I've got right here. And just like the Tauros and the Kangaskhan, we did actually hatch this thing, but it's from Japan. And the reason why this one's on top of the other two is because this one can no longer be hatched as a Mr. Mime. You can hatch Mime Juniors nowadays, that is a possibility, but you can never hatch a Shiny Mr. Mime ever again. So that's why I feel like it deserved to be a little higher than the other two. And just like I mentioned before, it is a regional that can only be found in Europe, and this one is from Japan, so that's really cool. Number 16 on this list is going to be the Shadow Mismagius, and as you can see, it's already level 50, so you can probably tell why I did that. It is a 100%. This isn't my first 100% Shadow, but the odds of getting a 100% Shadow are very, very low. But this one's kind of low on the list because you can get these from grunts, or at least you could get them from grunts. Not much anymore, but it may come back. And out of all my Shadow Hundos, I do consider this to be on the lower end. Number 15 on the list is another Shadow Hundo, Shadow Hundo Nidoking. And the reason why I love this thing so much is because it's from a leader for one. I believe it's from Arlo, if I'm correct, but also I really love Nidoking. It's one of my favorite Kanto Pokemon. And to have a Shadow Hundo of this thing is just really awesome. Like, it's really not that useful. I don't use it for anything, and sadly it is kind of weak. But for personal reasons, I really do love this thing, so I'm very happy I got it. Number 14 is my Shundo Swampert, and the reason why this one's on the list is because I actually got this from Mega Raids, and I had no idea at the time that it was a Shundo. I just thought that the CP was kind of big, so I caught it, and sure enough, it was a Shundo. And this was my first ever Shundo from a raid, period. I had never gotten a Shundo from a raid at any time before this one, and I had multiple opportunities to get one, but it just never panned out that way. And another reason why I love this thing is that it has an amazing Mega Evolution. It's considered to be one of the best water types in the game, and at a point, it was the best water type until later on when we got the Primals. But back then, this thing was insane to have, and it still is insane to have. I'm very happy to have it, and it looks really cool. Number 13 is my Shundo Ho-Oh. This is my first ever Shundo legendary from a legendary raid. And it's also kind of special to me because I got this from a remote raid just before, you know, they kind of just nerfed all the remote raids down. So I decided to do a lot of these raids, and I ended up getting 2 Hundos before this one that weren't Shundos, obviously, but then my third one turned out to be a Shundo, and I was just so happy. It's a beautiful shiny, and it's actually pretty decent. The moveset I have on it's pretty good, though some people argue that Earthquake's good for it, but it's like really good in Master League, so I'm glad to have it. Plus, again, when it comes down to shinies, like this thing is a very solid shiny. I think it looks like one of the best shinies in all of Pokemon Go. Next up is this Shundo Bastiodon. I'm very happy to have this thing, and this is my first ever Shundo from a research, which was really cool. It was during a research day, though, so the odds on this thing were incredibly boosted, but it doesn't matter to me. Like, it's a really fun one, and I honestly couldn't believe it when I got it. Like, I was ecstatic when I saw this thing, so glad to have it, even though it really doesn't have much of a purpose in my inventory. Though apparently in Ultra League, this thing could be kinda decent at level 50, but I've really never tested it out to try it. Number 11 is this Shundo Garchomp. The reason why it's near the middle tier is because of how I got it. I did get it during Gibble Community Day, which means it was a boosted shiny, but as you can see in the name there, it says Shundo INCS. That stands for Incense. I actually got very lucky and instanced this thing, and it was my first shiny of all of Gibble Community Day. And another cool thing about it was that I knew that it had the possibility of being a Shundo because of the CP, because it had the same number as what you would have gotten from researches. It came from the Incense, which means it could have been any other combination of IVs that would have led to that number. But sure enough, it did turn into a Shundo, and I was just so happy. And this thing does have a Mega Evolution at some point in the future, which should be absolutely insane to have, and I can't wait to get it as a shiny Dex entry. It's gonna look really good. And at the halfway point, number 10, we have this 0% shiny Tyranitar, which is really cool to have. Shiny 0% are actually way rarer than Shundos are. But the reason why I consider this to be in the middle ground is because this was from a community day, which means the shiny odds on this thing were quite high. Even though the IV combination is quite rare, that doesn't happen very often, plus if it was weather boosted, this would not have been a possibility at all. It still had a very high shiny boost to it, so I kind of just consider it to be more in the middle ground because of that. But again, 0% are far more rare than Shundos are, because the only way to get a 0% is by getting it in the wild with non-weather boost on it. You can't trade for them, you cannot raid for them, you can't do anything at all. If the sun was shining, this thing would not have been a 0%. And plus, I can also Mega Evolve this thing into Mega Tyranitar, and it's literally the worst Mega Tyranitar in all of Pokemon Go, which is funny to me to have it. Even though it is a very useful dark type, it's fine to have the worst of it too. Plus, I love Godzilla, and this thing kind of gives a little bit of Godzilla vibes, even though that horn on its head's a little weird. Number 9 is this Shundo Boaterfree. As you can see, it does have the bow on the top of its head there. I'm putting this one at number 9 because it is a Shundo costume Pokemon, and we caught it as a Butterfree. We didn't get it as a Caterpie or anything like that. We actually got it as a Butterfree. And even though it did have a perma-boosted odd on it, it's about a 1 in 64 odd rate of getting a shiny Butterfree in the wild. I consider it a little bit more rare as well, because these things only show up during Fashion Week, so you only have a week to go for them, and I got very lucky and I got the Shundo of it. Plus, at some point in the future, we will get Dynamax and Gigantamax Butterfree might be an amazing bug type. We don't know yet, but it might be. And seeing that costumes can Mega, I'm sure they can Gigantamax too, so fingers crossed it works out that way. Number 8 is my Shadow 100% Gardevoir that I got in Seoul, South Korea, inside of the subway, no less. The sad thing about this is I didn't think that CP looked like it was a Hundo, and then it turned out it was a Hundo, which was insane. Like, I'm so happy as well, because this thing is a very good fairy type, and with the Shadow boost on it, it is insanely useful against dragons. The major downside to her, sadly, is that she cannot Mega Evolve into Mega Gardevoir, but that's perfectly fine. I use this quite often, and when it comes down to Shadow Hundos, I actually have quite a few useful ones. I'm really glad that I haven't gotten a lot of just basically useless ones. And again, it's from South Korea. I really enjoyed that trip, and this definitely made that trip even better. Lucky number 7 on this list is my 100% Shadow Salamence. This thing is very, very powerful. In fact, for quite some time in the past, this used to be the #1 dragon type in all of Pokemon Go before we started getting some dragon megas. And sadly, this one cannot Mega Evolve into a Shadow 100% Mega Salamence, because that would just be insane. But this is also my first ever Shadow Hundo Pokemon in all of Pokemon Go, and it comes from a leader as well. So I absolutely love having it, and I use it quite often, though it is very squishy, and usually it only gets a couple outrages off before it goes down. Though hopefully someday we can Mega Evolve Shadows. I'm sure it's never gonna happen, but who knows? Maybe Giovanni figures something out and he makes Shadow Megas. I can see it happening. Number 6 and number 5 on this list are going to be pretty much tied. I only am really choosing them in this order because of the order in which I got them in. So number 6 on this list is going to be my Schlundo Groudon that I got in a lucky trade, and this is only my second ever Schlundo from a lucky trade, and I have done tons of them. And obviously why I love having this thing is because it is a Shundo Legendary, but also it's the best ground type in all the game, especially when we Primal Revert it. Once we do that, it becomes one of the best Pokemon when it comes down to power in my teams, period. Plus it does have its exclusive move of Precipice Blades as well. This is the #1 ground type in all of Pokemon Go, and surprisingly really good in the Master League as well. And just look at the CP, 6672. That is massive. But that does bring us to number 5 on the list, my Shundo Kyogre, my first ever Shundo from a trade ever. And it's cool that I have both the Groudon and the Kyogre. Now I just gotta hopefully get that Rayquaza at some point, but it's really cool to have this thing. And just like how Primal Groudon is #1 ground type, Primal Kyogre is the #1 water type when it has its move up. I believe it's called Origin Pulse, and it also looks really good. I love that they turn black, though the top purple teeth look a little weird to me, but yeah, just really cool that I have Shundos of both Primals as well. But again, fingers crossed that at some point I will get that Rayquaza and I can have the trifecta. Number 4 on the list is this Shundo Squirtle Squad Squirtle. As you can see right here, it is a Shundo, and the best part about this thing is that we got this from a research. We have had 3 Squirtle Community Days. We were only supposed to have 2, but sadly the Community Day Classic screwed up, so we had to have another one to help everybody who missed out. But I really shouldn't say sadly, because that gave me an extra day to grind out the researches, and sure enough, near the very end of that time, we got this Shundo. And this was a big goal for me, especially because on the second Community Day Classic, the remake, I was having terrible shiny luck, just awful shiny luck. I think I only had like 2 or 3 Squirtle Squad Squirtle shinies from all the researches at that point, and then all of a sudden, this one popped up. And I'm putting it very high on the list mostly because this thing is a very rare shiny costume Pokemon. It's only shown up in 3 Community Days, and one other time during an event where they were doing a collaboration with, I believe, Ed Sheeran or something like that, and like he said he really loved Squirtle with the glasses. So technically it was out and about during that time, but it wasn't even shiny boosted at that time either. So who knows when we're ever gonna see this again. Well, maybe Community Day recap in December. We might see these in researches at some point. But after that, we might not see this thing for quite some time, so the fact that I have a Shundo of it makes me insanely happy. I don't know if I'll ever evolve this thing into Blastoise. If it turns out that Gigantamax Blastoise is just an insane water type and it blows everything else out of the water, then maybe I'll evolve it at that point. But for now, we're gonna keep him as a Squirtle because, you know, iconic Squirtle Squad Squirtle. I'm a 90s kid. I remember the anime quite well when it came down to that Squirtle, so I'm kind of sentimental on this guy. Number 3 is another 0%, this 0% shiny Metagross. But the reason why I consider this one far more rare comparatively to my other 0% and a few other of my Pokemon is because this is not from a Community Day. This was caught shortly after Beldum Community Day, and this was before the bar system was even a thing. As you can see, it says 000 right there. Back then, we just used to have the leaders telling us, oh, this is simply amazing, the attack, the defense, the HP, you know, stuff like that. And when I caught this Beldum, I remember it saying like, this is terrible. It's attack, it's defense, it's HP, it's all just awful. And I was thinking to myself, maybe I should just transfer this thing if it's so bad. But back then, I wasn't really good about transferring shinies, and I'm glad I didn't because this is actually probably my rarest shiny in my entire collection. And now we're at the top 2, but before I show you them, I don't really know which order they should be in. I've decided to put them in this order specifically because it just kind of makes sense in my head, but let me know in the comments down below if you think I got them mixed around. I'd like to know your guys' opinions. Oh, with that being said, number 2 is this Shadow 100% Suicune that we got from Giovanni. This is definitely my rarest Shadow Hundo, if not one of my rarest Pokemon in my entire collection because we have only had 1 opportunity to get this thing. Or possibly 2 if you held onto a Rocket Radar, but not a lot of people did that for Shadow Suicune. And I got this from a balloon, no less. Like literally, I had no idea it was a Shadow Hundo until I finally caught the thing, and sure enough it was. And let me tell you, the process to max this thing out to level 50 took forever. Nobody wants to do these raids, and also it didn't help that these raids have not been around for quite some time, but I am happy that it is level 50 now, and I do use it occasionally in PvP against the leaders. I don't really use it in Master League at all because this thing would probably get absolutely destroyed, but it's a fun trophy. I know that in the future we'll probably have Shadow Suicune raids, which would introduce it shiny, and a lot of other people might end up getting the Hundo Shadow Suicune, but for right now that hasn't happened yet, and it probably won't happen for another possibly year, so I do consider this to be one of my rarest Pokemon just because of that. And now for my number 1 rarest Pokemon in all of Pokemon Go, it's this 100% Osaka Rayquaza, and as you can see, it has the castle in the background. I consider this to be my rarest Pokemon just because of the fact that it has the background on it. It wasn't a guarantee that you would get the background on these things, not one bit. And quite a few Rayquazas I did didn't have the background at all, but I got extremely lucky, and sure enough, it did have the background. And I caught this thing on my final ball. Like, I honestly almost never got this thing. And also, it looks insanely cool cool when you Mega Evolve it and it has like the background behind it. Plus, I really love the Mega Evolution for Rayquaza. I hope they do the same thing for like Mewtwo, you know, these big Megas. I think they deserve it for sure. But we're about to see it. There it is. We have a Hundo Mega Rayquaza with the Osaka Castle behind it. Like, that is so cool to me. Now, in terms of people having this one, there are far more people out here that have Hundo Rayquazas with the backgrounds on them. I saw quite a few of them from London, New York, and Osaka, including some people that got Shundos with the backgrounds. But I still consider this to be extremely rare because we might never get this ever again. You know what I mean? This may never happen again. But now that you've seen mine, I want to know what you guys have. Do you have anything incredible that you're just in love with? Please let me know in the comments down below. And also, don't forget to smash that subscribe button for me. Show me some love. And if you're really enjoying this content and you want to see even more of it, I highly suggest this video down here. But with that being said, I'll see you in the next one.